Hey guys, okay, so in the last video we looked at the software side of 3D printing, and in this video we'll be looking at the hardware side, the fun part. Despite the name, hardware is not that hard, but 3D printing is about tinkering and experimenting, failing and improving. It is a constant learning experience, even for the pros. So don't be disheartened if things don't go smoothly at first. That's natural. And once you've got a few failed prints under your belt, you'll start to learn what works and what doesn't, and eventually you'll get really good prints every time. Now before anything else, a really quick word on safety. As industrial equipment goes, 3D printers are pretty safe, but take note the extruder can get really very hot, over 200 Celsius or about 400 Fahrenheit. The print bed can also be between 50 and 100 Celsius, so between maybe 120 and 220 Fahrenheit, so always be wary of hot parts when the printer is turned on. There's also a lot of moving parts, which means keep fingers and other loose clothes away from the moving bits. The motors used in 3D printers are surprisingly strong, and this would be a really embarrassing way to lose a finger. Okay, without any further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so to start with, I've taken out 3 3D printers and I'm going to be showing you individual elements of each one, where you can find specific parts of the printer, what they look like on different printers, so that you can get a feel for the kind of printers that are out there. So in front of me here I have a Creality Ender 3. This is one that you have to assemble yourself. I have here a Monoprice Select Mini, mini in every way, small price, small size, and here I have a Flashforge Finder. So these 3 printers are a good example of 3 quite different types of FDM printer, so let's get started and get stuck in. Okay, so to begin with we'll go for the very basic anatomy, and that is each printer, we use the Creality Ender 3 for this, has a print bed, which is this part here. It has an extruder, which is the part that actually melts the plastic and prints it onto the bed, and the extruder can move back and forth by means of something called a gantry, and that's this metal part here. So the extruder on this printer is found right here. It's front and center, and the extruder's job is to heat up to approximately 200 and 220 degrees Celsius in order to melt the plastic that's coming in. Now in the case of the Monoprice Select Mini, the filament reel sits on the side here, and it comes up here through this object here. This is a stepper motor that is designed to feed in the plastic filament through the side and down this tube we call the Bowden tube. The filament is pushed through the Bowden tube and down into the extruder head, where it is heated up and pressed out the nozzle on the bottom here and onto the build plate. The extruder is capable of moving in this direction, and it can also move up and down, although I can't demonstrate that without turning it on. Now what's interesting over here about the Flashforge Finder is it actually moves in a slightly different way. Instead of the print bed moving on the y-axis, the extruder head moves along the gantry on an X and Y axis. It doesn't move up and down, instead the print bed moves up and down to meet the print head. Now instead of having a Bowden tube, where a motor at the back pushes filament through, the extruder motor in this one is actually inside the extruder head, and instead it pulls the filament into the head and extrudes it out of the nozzle. Another interesting thing about these print beds is that in the case of the Flashforge Finder, they can be removed, which is useful for when you want to remove a part or clean the print bed. Now each of these printers feature a small screen on the front that can be used to view the status of the print and control the printer. In the case of the Flashforge Finder, it's a touchscreen. In the case of these 2 printers, it's a normal screen with a little dial that you can twist, and it doesn't really make a difference. Both work perfectly well, and it really comes down to your preferences and your budget. Now a really important part of getting your 3D prints to work successfully is making sure that the print bed is level, because if the print bed isn't level, you'll find that your prints don't stick down properly and you won't be able to print anything at all. Luckily, all printers have some features built in that allow you to do print bed leveling. The print bed leveling feature on the Flashforge Finder is pretty simple. There's an interface on the screen, and you can navigate to that and use it to go into print bed leveling mode. At this point, the print bed will move into position and you'll be able to adjust it using these dials on the bottom of the print bed. Once you adjust the dials, you can then use a button on the screen and the printer will automatically try to verify that the print bed is level, advising you to go higher or lower if it's not. It's a similar thing on the Monoprice Select Mini. Being a slightly lower end printer, the features are a bit simpler. Instead of having a dial, you have screws on the side that you can adjust, and then you use a piece of paper, slip it between the nozzle and the print bed, and make sure that the distance between nozzle and print bed is consistent across the entire print bed. Another great way to make sure that your print sticks to the bed is by using 2 of the most important tools in a 3D printer's arsenal, and that's basic glue or Pritt stick, and painter's tape or masking tape. Now, depending on what material you're printing with, you'll find that one of these will work better than the other, and also whether or not you have a heated print bed will make a big difference. It's really simple to use this stuff. Most commonly, you use glue like this. You simply apply the glue onto the surface of the print bed, making sure to get a nice even coverage across the print bed. Typically, you'll reapply it before each print. After a few prints, you'll notice that there'll be quite a large buildup of glue, and at that point, it's a good idea to remove your build plate and give it a nice wash and reapply the glue. This way you make sure that you have just the right amount of glue to make sure your prints stick every time. A quick word on filaments. There are a lot of different ways that filaments can be fed into printers. In the case of the Monoprice Select Mini, it just hangs off the side. It's the same with the Creality Ender 3. In the case of the Flashforge Finder, they actually neatly hide it in a compartment at the back, which is very tidy for your lab, but it does have the disadvantage that you can only use filament reels that are about 0.5 kilos or less, so you won't be able to use bigger ones in there, which can be quite annoying. Last thing I'll say on this though, a really nice feature which is a great one to have, is this small black device here is called a runout sensor, and it can detect when you've run out of filament and automatically pause your print. Without a filament runout sensor, your 3D printer could run out of filament and just keep printing. You'll come back to it in a couple of hours and find that it's just been doing nothing for the last 3 hours. It's very annoying, so it's a really useful feature to have. In the course of 3D printing, you'll regularly have to change your filament. You might have run out, or you might want a different color, but in any case, it's important that you learn how to do this properly. It's pretty simple to do, but if you get it wrong, you can end up clogging your extruder, and that can be a bit of a headache to unclog. Different printers have different features on ways to do this, but they all start with heating up the print head. For printers like the Flashforge Finder, the process is very simple. You simply lift up the tube to reveal the 3D printer filament, like that. And then with the Flashforge Finder, you'll press down the button on the side, releasing the filament, and it can be pulled safely out. To load the filament, once the printer is heated up, in the case of a printer like the Flashforge Finder, you simply press the filament into the top, the extruder motor will grab it and start to pull it through, and after a few moments, you should see the filament in a new color, if you're changing colors, appear in the nozzle at the bottom of the extruder. Wait until you see the new color appear, and that's when you know your filament has been successfully fed in. Now, in the case of printers like the Monoprice Select Mini, instead of having the filament removed from the extruder down here, the filament is removed up here. Once the heating element has reached full temperature, you can release the filament by pressing this button on the top, and then gently pull the filament all the way out until it is removed. This is a really simple process as long as you're gentle. Make sure that you don't use too much force. When you're installing new filament into your printer, first you want to make sure that you have a nice clean end on the filament. If you have a messy end like this, it won't be able to go into the extruder properly. So use a pair of side cutters, like this, to make sure that you have a nice clean end. Press the clip on top of the extruder motor and gently feed the filament into your printer. After a while, you'll feel some resistance, and that means the filament is almost loaded. At this point, it's normally a good idea to let the motor finish the job by manually going to the menu and moving the extruder motor until you see new filament coming through. Once you see the new color of your filament, you'll know it's ready. Now, we've just one more thing left to show you in this video. In the last video, we talked about how it was possible to start your print from your software. But if you're not starting it from your software, you can always start prints locally. You can load the G-code file onto a USB stick, put the USB stick into your printer, and then use the menu to navigate to the right place, select your print, and begin. And 3D printing something really is as easy as that. So by now, you know what 3D printing is, you know how to use the software, and how to use the hardware as well. Join us again in the next video where we'll be talking about how you can 3D print and assemble your very own Maker Mask.